and welcome to Undaunted, bringing into the news untold stories. I am Star Smart. Let's begin. Well, as the world watches the build-up to yet another fraudulent colonial electoral drama slated for October 12th, 2025, we see the people of Ambazonia do not waste breath or hope on a system that has only served to tighten their chains, while Yaoundé and its media organs scramble to paint a picture of democratic revival, parading 81 candidacies like ornaments in a broken showcase. Ambazonians recognize the distraction for what it is, a desperate circus masking the decay of a colonial regime. The Amazonian people have been here before. They've watched the so-called elections of La République du Cameroon for decades, and each time the result has been the same, a pre-scripted performance with a predictable ending. In this charade, the ballot is never stronger than the bullet, and the opposition is never a contender, just decoration for international spectators. But 2025 is different, not because of any real hope in Yaoundé's ballot box, but because Ambazonia is no longer in a state of reaction. The Southern Cameroons have shifted focus from street-level struggle to strategic nation building, while the colonial state prepares to select its next overseer. Probably the same one, Ambazonia is preparing to govern its destiny. Under the leadership of President Samuel Ikome's Sako, Ambazonia is asserting itself not as a rebel group or secessionist enclave, but as a nation in restoration, structured, lawful, diplomatic, and unshakably resolved. The factions and internal noise that once gave detractors fuel have been silenced by clarity of purpose and legitimacy of action. Ambazonia has embraced the architecture of statehood, aligning its actions and institutions with the very foundations of international law, specifically the Montevideo Convention of 1933, which outlines the criteria for nationhood: a defined territory, a permanent population, a functioning government, and the capacity to enter into relations with other states. Well, these are not ambitions. These are realities already taking form within Ambazonia. So while French Cameroon's politicians bicker over coalition and call for unity in a system that has never honored it, Ambazonians refuse to be distracted. Ambazonians are not part of the game. They are not voting in the show, but looking for representation in a house built on Ambazonian ashes. Instead, they are standing up as a nation from the ruins they tried to bury Ambazonia under. Ambazonia is rising and rising not with noise, but with diplomatic precision, strategic coordination, and global engagement. The world is beginning to see the difference between a colonial enterprise dressed as a republic and a people determined to reclaim their sovereignty. We hear the words of Dr. Martin Mungwa, Secretary of State for Communications and IT of the Ambazonian government, fully restored, carry more than information, carry the diplomatic pulse of a maturing nation. It is on this premise we'll head on to the prime headlines to usher us into the full briefings of Undaunted tonight. Do stay tuned. And these are the prime headlines on Undaunted tonight. Ambazonian State Army of BOYO neutralizes occupation convoy in tactical ambush. The Colonial SDO in the Southern Cameroons retaliates with road blockade as lockdown solidarity continues. Ambazonians reject the collective punishment. Akere Muna doubles down on his betrayal, endorsing Colonial #federalism as Ambazonians demand total freedom. We see CNA's Big Six, the Cameroon news agency's Big Six spotlight, which sparks political theater. Ambazonia rejecting the colonial elections and demanding focusing on their own sovereignty. Ambazonia is rising. We see from factional chaos to diplomatic clarity under the leadership of Dr. Samuel Sako. This is an editorial from Dr. Martin Wungwa, Secretary of State for Communications and IT. We'll take a look at it in its detail. And on the Africa scene, Ivory Coast President Alassane Ouattara announces bid for fourth term ahead of presidential election. On the global scene, the United Kingdom signals possible recognition of Palestine as Gaza death toll surpasses 60,000. Let's get the news in full briefings. In a decisive operation carried out deep within Ambazonian territory, 2 armored vehicles belonging to the French Cameroon regime were neutralized in a precision ambush by local defense forces. The vehicles carrying dozens of foreign troops, referred to by the locals as toy soldiers, were destroyed using Ambazonian indigenous defense capabilities, popularly known as popcorns. Now, we see video footage from the scene confirming the effectiveness and strategic accuracy of the ambush, leaving no doubt about the professionalism and resolve of the Ambazonian State Army. This operation, executed by the valiant members of the Ambazonian Self-Defense Ambazonian State Army in BOYO County, stands as a testament to the resilience and the unyielding spirit of a people determined to reclaim their homeland from foreign occupation. Ambazonia remains a no-go zone for the colonial forces of La République du Cameroon. The territory has once again proven to be a graveyard for invading forces and their collaborators who continue to face resistance at every corner. The leadership of the Ambazonian State Army in BOYO County has reiterated their commitment to the defense of southern Cameroon and called on Ambazonians at home and abroad to continue funding their county and local government areas, the very seat of grassroots power and sovereignty. The momentum towards the restoration of the stolen independence of southern Cameroon is not only unstoppable, it is a sacred duty. Each victory of the Ambazonian State Army only brings Ambazonia closer to BOYO. Well, we have with us in the studio Barrister Mbeseha. Barrister Mbeseha, good evening and welcome.
Good evening to you, and thank you for having me.
All right, now, Barrister Mbeseha, amid the climate in the entire southern Cameroon and the entire Cameroon, even we see it's the electoral period and campaigns and a lot of thoughts are going on about the elections. But that hasn't deterred the Ambazonian State Army to stop in their acts of defense of their territory, the Ambazonian territory. We see time and time again different Ambazonian State Army from different counties continue to carry out these attacks against the colonial forces of occupation. In light of that, would like to get your thoughts. What would you say these actions from the ASA, the Ambazonian State Army, tells both the La République du Cameroon forces of occupation and the entire globe at large?
Well, what happened in BOYO, like what is happening elsewhere in Ambazonia now, is absolutely important. Most important. Not because what they did last year was not important, or what they did the last 5-6 years. All those events were important. But what is going on right now is more important than the previous events. Why? Because in the face of all what is going on right now, they are contemplating having elections in Cameroon in the next few months. Not just a matter of elections, presidential elections. It is a reminder to whoever assumes power in Yaoundé that you have a problem to deal with. It is a reminder to them that the previous administration that they are trying to replace or to renew their mandate has failed them. Why? Because they told them less than 7 years ago that Ambazonians were barely 2 cubes of sugar that would melt as soon as possible. It reminds who takes over that the two cubes of sugar have since not melted. They are still there. It reminds Mr. Paul Biya who is looking for another mandate. Let's forget your mandate. You don't forget that you told us in 2018, 2017 that you're going to win the war within 2 weeks. 7 years have gone through, 8 years and 9 years, and you've not won. And so if that was a political strategy, telling people of 2 cubes of sugar, winning the war in 2 days or 2 weeks or 1 month, it has failed. It was a wrong strategy. The war is still on. And whoever comes to take power in Yaoundé in the next 2 months should be ready to confront the problem head on. No lying, no deceit, going to Bermuda 20, 40 times to implement the so-called Grand National Dialogue. Going to Boya 20, 50, 60 times to talk about disarmament. Because if they are disarmed, there will be nobody fighting anymore. And so it's very important. It's a good reminder that, again, the incoming government in Yaoundé, be it a renewed one, a new one, or an old one being renewed, as usual, you have a problem. A problem that calls only for one solution. Go to the discussion table, talk peace, agree on the root causes of the problem, and decide when the two parties part their own ways. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Barson and Mbeseha, for that wonderful input. But then, still in Ambazonia, we see that just last week, outrage swept across the Ambazonian heartland following the illegal arrest and detention of two infants and 7 parents and adopted by colonial forces simply for being related to, allegedly being related to fallen Ambazonian General Novodai. In response, not fallen, I beg your pardon. In response, the counties of Ngoketunja Count, BOYO, Matung, and Mbeseha initiated a solidarity lockdown, demanding the immediate release of the abducted family members of General Novodai. The Amazonian State Army later clarified that roads would be only opened on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays, a humanitarian gesture to ease population movement, but not a cancellation of the lockdown. Now, today, a new development sends a message. A chilling reminder of the colonial tactics, colonial regime's pattern of repression. We see the colonial SDO of a division in southern Cameroon has now barred all passengers from BOYO, Matung, and Ngoketunja counties from traveling through his jurisdiction to reach La République du Cameroon. His reason is since the Ambazonian State Army has continued to enforce a lockdown along the Bamenda and BOYO corridor, which was initiated to stand in solidarity with the abducted families of the Ambazonian state fighters. He will now retaliate with this. He will now retaliate with his own road ban. Well, it is obvious that this is not governance. It is obvious that this is not security. It is indeed control through collective punishment. Rather than engaging the root cause, the arbitrary arrest and inhumane detention of civilians and babies, which is already illegal, we see the colonial regime's local administrators are instead and once again responding with cruelty, masked as law. It is not enough that the peoples of Ambazonia were kidnapped and jailed without trial, and I'm talking even infants and old. Now the population has to be cut off from basic movement, economic survival, and inter-county connection. Well, it is quite telling. It is clear that La République du Cameroon does not see Southern Cameroons as citizens. It sees Ambazonia as a population to suppress, a people to humiliate, and a resistance to crush. In the words of one online observer, this proves that Cameroonians, which is people of Cameroons, do not care about Southern Cameroonians. They do not ask themselves why the Bamenda BOYO road was blocked in the first place. All they want is control and the total annihilation of the Ambazonian people. Well, the Ambazonian people know the truth. They are punished because they demand dignity, because they defend the lives of families who have been arbitrarily abducted, and because they refuse to be silent while their babies are dragged to prison by colonial forces. But tonight, one question echoes across the territory. If the simple act of standing with grieving families result in road barring, threats, and retribution, what future does French Cameroon offer to Southern Cameroons but slavery? Barrister Mbeseha, we see that with the colonial SDO now blocking all access routes into La Republique as retaliation for the lockdown that was normally set by the Ambazonian State Army. We wonder, what should the people understand about the political message behind this move? And how do Ambazonians stay vigilant against misinformation and manipulation by colonial administrators? But more importantly, what should Ambazonians understand by the political message in this move of the colonial SDO?
Well, remember yesterday we had a discussion on somebody some people call themselves chef d'etat, administrative officers, DOs, and senior divisional officers who claim territory for themselves, claim any authority they have for themselves. Is this any message? Is any no message? What, to me, and to the best of my knowledge, is just begging for relevance. Remember, the lockdown was declared by the ASAs for a reason, because they had adopted little babies and locked them. It started in Goko, Tunisia. It has spread to Donga Mountain. It is spreading to other counties, Mbeseha, Bui. And so, if the colonial master has to say something, we are locking down to free the babies locked up. What is his own lockdown about? What is his own goal? What is his own grievance? The grievance against the people is that what has he done? And so I said earlier that he's just begging for relevance. There was already a lockdown there. So his only declaration is just trying to buy face to say, well, if vehicles are not moving, it is because I, Monsieur the Prefet, the chef d'etat, I did it. You've done nothing. Your blockade has not answered the question. The question still remains, are the children, are the babies released? If they are not released, we thank you for declaring the lockdown. We thank you for helping us to enforce what we already put there in place. And so we can congratulate you for harvesting where you did not sow. But as long as it goes to lockdown, congratulations for that. Because again, let the people reminded of why the lockdown. It is now Donga Mountain, but it started in Goko, Tunisia, because they adopted babies. Those babies are still in prison. And so the lockdowns, they are just starting. They are talking about Donga Mountain. I've said that they are spreading to Mbeseha. And why not in the next few months, they will spread throughout the whole Amazonia. What they are trying to do is begging to belong where they don't belong. They are trying to fight a ghost with bullets, with tanks. Again, we have said before here, that Ambazonia is a spirit, is a hope, is a belief, it's an ideology which you cannot fight with guns, which you cannot fight with prefectorial orders. No, that is not going to work. It has not worked for the past 7 years. It will not work today. Again, lockdown the whole of Ambazonia. In the protocol you're locking down, we're having ghost town, I said it yesterday. Every Monday, you struggle to kill it, you fail. We've started a lockdown in Donga Mountain, in Goko, Tunisia. It is continuing, being bought by Mbeseha, being included by Bui. And then you come into declare on a roadblock. If anything you do, the only relevance for them, for you, Mr. the Prefect, is that your own are just road blockades. There's a difference between a lockdown and road blockades. You block a road and make money out of it. You send gendarmes, soldiers, police to stand on the road. If you pass through that blockade, you pay money. You just pay for your passage. Lockdowns are permanent. You don't even see who's locking down. And so I guess it is a blockade he has put there. It's just to harvest money from the poor people, for those who venture out. But if you don't venture out, and we've seen it is a practice, they can look for you from your house and catch you and ask you to pay money. And so they have all these tools, illegal tools, criminal tools to torture the people. But it goes down to one thing. Ambazonia is no longer what it was in 2016. We've long since passed that line. And so, blockade, lockdown, do what you want to do. The notion of Ambazonia is an ideology. You should not be killed the way you think. Over to them.
All right, Barrister Mbeseha. Well, continuing with the reports of tonight, we cannot leave out the fact that this is the colonial electoral period, presidential elections period, and in as much as it doesn't exactly concern Ambazonians, we can't leave it out because it just goes to show La République charade. Now, just last week, we reported on the unsettling return of Barrister Akere Muna to Southern Cameroons. He was received not with scrutiny, but with open arms by the very system that continues to subjugate Ambazonians, one that he now vies for. That warm embrace in the capital of occupation served as a painful reminder to Southern Cameroons that some of their so-called elites are not just detached, they are indeed complicit. Today, another chapter in this betrayal unfolds in what appears to be a calculated move to cement his colonial candidacy. Barrister Akere Muna has published a post on his official page, proudly showcasing support from Dieudonné Somba, another mouthpiece for La République du Cameroun. The post outlines what it calls a clear-eyed diagnosis of Cameroon's structural problems and proposes reforms like federalism and monetary adjustments to fix the decaying system. But let's be clear, Ambazonians are not asking for federalism. Ambazonians are not interested in reviving or restructuring the colonial regime. Ambazonians are fighting to end it for them. Federalism is not liberation. It is assimilation dressed in polite language. And for someone like Barrister Akere Muna, whose lineage traces back to Solomon Tandeng Muna, a man remembered not for defending Ambazonia, but for helping sell her out. This latest move only affirms what many freedom fighters and civilians have long suspected, that Akere Muna is not walking the path of his people's struggle, but rather the path of political ambition under a foreign flag. Instead of using his platform to speak out against the killings, arbitrary arrest, and economic blockade of Ambazonian towns, Barrister Akere Muna is shopping for endorsements from enablers of the same colonial regime. As Ambazonian communities mourn the dead, bury the wounded, and resist the occupation, Barrister Akere Muna campaigns for a position for himself. He is not speaking for Ambazonians, he is speaking to Cameroon, La République du Cameroun. And among the hashtags he proudly attached to his colonial endorsement post was hashtag federalism, a word that has become a dog whistle for continued oppression cloaked in reform. That one word is a loaded betrayal. For years, Ambazonians had made their position clear: total independence or nothing. No amount of constitutional remodeling under the same foreign roof can substitute the dignity of self-rule. Federalism as sold by Barrister Akere Muna and his kind is not a middle ground. It is a deliberate distraction, a way to keep Ambazonians chained while pretending the chains are looser. It recycles the same false hope once used by the colonial regime to deceive Southern Cameroons in 1961. Only to later dissolve even that illusion with the illegal 1972 referendum and the erasure of Ambazonian identity in 1984. So when Akere Muna, a son of the man who helped engineer this betrayal, uses hashtag federalism today, it is not just a political position. It is a continuation of a family legacy of submission. It is a coded message to La République that he is willing to be their polished face of reform, while Ambazonians continue to bleed for freedom. Barrister Akere Muna is not speaking for Ambazonia, he is speaking to Cameroon. And as he parades support from known colonial voices, Ambazonians watch with both resolve and renewed clarity. The people have not forgotten that this is the same man who has remained silent on the genocide in Ngabo, the massacre in Kumbo, and the imprisonment of innocent youths from BOYO to Bamenda and all of Ambazonia. The stage may be set for an election in La République, but Ambazonia remains firm in its rejection of that charade. Our focus, Ambazonia's focus, is not on ballots cast on their occupation. It is on boots, books, and barricades protecting Ambazonians' territory and dignity. Now, if those who claim Ambazonian roots can so easily abandon the struggle for sovereignty in exchange for applause in Yaoundé, then what really is the price of betrayal and who will hold them accountable? Now, Barrister Mbeseha, looking at this endorsement from Diodone Sumba, what does it really mean? What does it really mean? A recognized colonial representative signal about internal Ambazonian sentiment, and how might this impact the credibility of the Ambazonian movement facing both external aggression and internal uncertainty? Because this is what the world will see right now, owing to Barrister Akere origin.
Well, I've said here many times before, Akere, though the son of St. Muna, is not Ambazonian as far as we are concerned with this struggle. That's just a fact. Akere is running for the president of Cameroon. We've said that we don't take part in that presidential elections. Even if we were to take part there, I've said it many times before, and all of us, all Ambazonians voted Akere, we will take him nowhere. He will not win the elections. He will need the Francophone bloc, 80% to win. And so, what he talks there, he's trying to buy the vote of his electorate. The electorate is basically Francophone, La République du Cameroon. But what is important there is that Akere, a presidential candidate, like the rest of them, what he's saying is acknowledging that there's a problem. There's what they have always refused to acknowledge. There is an Anglophone problem. If that is what he would say to buy the vote and win the elections, so be it. But we have said and we have not changed our stand. Whoever wins the election will meet us on the conference table. If what President Akere brings in his suitcase to that conference table, if he brings a federation, so be it. It will be debated there. But let him prepare himself with the Sumba, whoever supports him, before he proposes the federation on the conference table. If he even comes there, he should think twice and answer the question for the Francophone people, for La République. What happened to the first federation? Where did it go to? Oh, you are trying to replace what you killed. And even if you replace what you killed, what is the guarantee that it will survive? And so we don't have any problem with this idea. It's carrying out a political agenda to win presidential elections in Republic du Cameroon. But we've set time with that number. That the time is over. We shall never be lauded over with a solution to Ambazonian problem. If he comes with his delegation, we shall come with ours. If that is what is in his suitcase, so be it. You put it on the table and then see us defeated, which I believe we have a good case to defeat any nonsense like that. And so let him campaign the way he wants. We have no time to deal with Akere as an individual. I personally have said here that Akere is a very good man to our Republic. One thing he has done for them, for example, he's been trying to fight that they should stop stealing their money from the national hydrocarbons, which they call Green Corps. But Akere fighting Green Corps for the stealing money from Green Corps. Green Corps is stealing all the money from oil. Akere has never said even once that oil that is being stolen comes from Dian in Ambazonia. That Dian in particular, and Ambazonia in general, deserve more. They deserve their fair share of that money. He has never said that. Because if you mention the name Ambazonia, Dian, I said yesterday, he will be down. Somebody will follow him. They are watching him. And that's why he qualifies to be a candidate over there. And so be it, Mr. Akere. You are just one. There are about 10 of you already, 13 candidates. Let everyone come out with their own agenda and say to the population there. But all of you combined or individually should know that whoever wins amongst you will meet Ambazonians on equal terms. Delegation to delegation. on equal terms, not in terms of coming to give us a federation, not in terms of coming to give us decentralization. No, it shall be discussed on equal terms. The root causes of the problem should be discussed. Come with your own proposals, but rest assured they are going to meet competent people on the conference table who will tell you what is that they want. Not up from you. We're not asking you to give us. We want this thing from the international community. Because decolonization was not the issue of La Republic decolonizing us. We're not asking for favors from Yaoundé. We're simply asking for our rights as international community. Because what they call the trust system was international. It was a United Nations system. It was not something organized by Yaoundé. Yaoundé itself, that is the Republic, they were also a trust like us. And so you don't go and tell a laborer to pay the other one out of his or own personal money. No, we're not asking favors from Yaoundé. So don't offer us something to please us. We are going to go to the conference getting what is ours by right, by law, not giving us what you think as a favor. That will not work. But you are free to think. You are free to put everything in your suitcase. But again, you will meet us on equal terms. That's the only condition, on equal terms. Over to you.
All right, Barrister Mbeseha, when you say whoever wins from the candidacy and whoever wins into the presidency will meet Ambazonia on the negotiation table, well said, yes. But then speaking of the multitude of people on the candidacy, the Cameroon News Agency has selected 6 out of the 81 presidential hopefuls, of course, excluding the incumbent president of La République, Barrister Akere included in the top 6, the big 6 as he called them. In their statement in CNA's declaration, if BIA wins without them forming a coalition, he's talking about if BIA wins without the big 6 of forming a coalition, then they should be blamed. This is the last chance for the opposition in Cameroon. Cameroonians are looking to them for a miracle. This is the post from CNA. But decades of experience have proved this illusion. In La République elections, there is no exact contest, there is no elections, only selection. As one Cameroonian bluntly observed, the whole opposition may nominate one candidate. They might even win in the polling booths. But they'll never win at the declaration table because BIA holds the yam and the knife. Another comment added with biting irony, dreamer, how can you hope to beat the organizer who is also your competitor and your referee? He ended that with a loud laugh. Now, in our previous report where we looked at the political circus with 81 candidacy and still no real contest, we laid bare the absurdity of Cameroon's political theater. With 81 lackluster candidates crowding the stage, the real power anointing the script behind the curtain, and Ambazonians refusing to bow to the spectacle. Now with CNA's Cameroon News Agency's cherry-picked Big 6, the performance is escalating. A handful of hopefuls are elevated to give shape to the illusion of competition, while the rest remains part of a controlled narrative. The elevation of Akere amongst the Big 6 only underscores how deeply the colonial system has co-opted those with even nominal Ambazonian heritage. While CNA presents Muna's inclusion as hopeful opposition potency, Ambazonians see it for what it really is, another distraction, another silver of false hope, meant to blind Ambazonians from the real struggle. Ambazonians will not be seduced by fanfare. They remember that even as the opposition buzzes with talks of coalitions and Big 6 alliances, the state remains firmly in the hands of the regime, not the ballot. The opposition still plays by rules set by those it claims to oppose. Its campaigns may dazzle, but its infrastructure is shackled to the same colonial lifeline. For people in southern Cameroon, this is not our moment. The political melodrama in Yaoundé holds no more weight for Ambazonia than a staged play by an empire that oppresses Ambazonian mothers, burns the villages in Ambazonia, and kidnaps children. Ambazonia cause is not an election. It is a land with dignity and freedom. Now, while Cameroonians continue to hope that this Big Six will bring change, Ambazonians prepare for the future that they will no longer borrow from a system that refuses to acknowledge their humanity. No speeches from Yaoundé, no votes in colonial polling stations can silence the heartbeat of a nation seeking to reclaim herself. If the ruling regime can choose its candidates, rig its own system, and control the outcome, even when the polls show otherwise, what power do any of the six truly hold? That is the question that leaves hanging. Barrister Mbeseha, we'll throw the floor now to you to give your thoughts on these. What power do this Big Six really hold, looking at the status quo of previous elections and the upcoming election, which doesn't seem to be any different?
Well, I wonder if the six have any power. I don't even know on what basis the CNA people choose the six. But coincidentally, the six are well known to everybody, at least to us. We know them. From those pictures, we know them by their pictures. We know them by their names. We know their stance as far as Ambazonian conflict is concerned. I analyze them only in terms of our conflict. And so there's nobody that we don't know. Well, we just talked about Muna. And so we don't need to talk about him again. That's him right there. There's another guy they call Osi Joshua. He comes from Dian. He claims to come from Dian. But he owes his political legacy to people in Rwanda. He has never won an election in Dian in the first place. He lives in Rwanda, he does his business, and he rents planes to Mr. Pobia. Again, remember 2 years ago, this is very Osi who signed a document telling that they should come abroad and catch all Ambazonians who are disturbing their peace. So we know him for that. Has anything changed in him? No. The next man we find sitting right there is Issa Chiroma. Is Issa Chiroma a new person? No. That's Issa Chiroma who in 2016-17 said there is no Ambazonian problem. There's nothing like Anglophone problem, he said. Who has forgotten his message on video and audio where he asked Bobga, why do you say that? When Bobga said there was genocide, he said there was no genocide. Why do you say that? And so we know him. He has been in government ever since. What's the government that he belongs to done to all this? Zero. The next man I find there is Buba Bello Magari, who owes his political emergence to Ambazonians. In the 1992 elections, he won almost all the seats to parliament for Ambazonia. That's what catapulted him to where he is. So he's not a stranger to us. He has been part of that government ever since. What a sit down for the Ambazonian when the Ambazonian struggle broke out, when the war broke out. Zero. We know Cabral Libi, he has been tight-lipped. He says nothing. He's just an adventurer. I'm analyzing them as far as Ambazonia is concerned. And then you find Kamto. Kamto, who is supposed to be the most popular person there. As far as Ambazonia is concerned, we know his position already. When asked, what will you do if you become president? He said, Cameroon has already made its history. What did he mean? Cameroon has already finished assimilating Amazonia. So we'll handle it from there, give them what we want to give them to solve the problem. So we know them. I don't even know on what basis the choice of six was. But again, it doesn't change anything. Any of them can win. Any of them who wins should just do what I've said. They should win knowing that the Ambazonian problem, that the promise that will not be there by the time they get there 10 years ago, almost 10 years ago, is still is hotter than what it was in 2018. They should win. Whoever wins there should know that is willing to lead a delegation to meet the Ambazonians as equals on the discussion table to address the root causes of the problem, most of which are written. They are documented. They are not imagination. And so the choice of 6 out of 13 or 6 out of 80 is irrelevant. At the end of the day, only one of them will win. And that one who wins should go to today with this message in his suitcase. Ambazonia is gone. But they are not going to go like that. We sit down and talk. We just say negotiating. We're not going. just going to negotiate. They will compensate us for the loss they've cost us. That will form part of that negotiation. I just talk about oil. Stolen, drilled, and stolen from them. They will compensate us for those things. That's part of the negotiations that we will deal with. And so, I'm not here to grade them. And Ambazonia has no reason to grade anybody there. Let them win or lose. But the most important thing is that the winner will know that the era of the Uganda national dialogue is over. The special status has failed. The disarmament is no longer going to be the issue. Separation is going to be the central thing to be discussed. Now, if you don't think separation is the rightful thing, tell us why. But we'll reserve that for the discussion table. Over to you.
All right, thank you so much, Barrister Mbeseha, for joining in on Undaunted tonight. But this is where we call it a close with you. Thank you for your wonderful contributions, as always.
Thank you for having me.
All right, do have a great night. Now, on to the very last concerns on the home front. As Colonial Cameroon gears up for another charade on October 12, 2025, calling it an election, the people of Ambazonia are focused on a different path, not selection, but restoration. A sovereign cause that has moved decisively from internal factionalism to global diplomatic clarity under President Samuel Sako. What many once saw as a fractured liberation movement has transformed into a structured government in exile, one that is increasingly reorganized and recognized and engaged with by global powers, not as rebels, but as a people with a legitimate case rooted in international law and history. Under President Sako's visionary leadership, Ambazonia has transitioned from a reactive resistance to a proactive national project of restoration, shifting focus from mere struggle to the strategic architecture of statehood. Now, this is a disciplined defense institution with a defined territory, permanent population, functioning government, and a growing ability to engage internationally, all of which align squarely with the Montevideo Convention of 1933, the international legal standard for state recognition. While the regime in Yaoundé prepares for yet another recycled ritual of colonial power, Ambazonia has emerged with constitutional direction, political structure, and strategic alliances, declaring to the world they are not begging to belong, they are rising to reclaim. Now, to break this down further, we bring you a powerful voice from the interim government, the Secretary of State for Communications and IT, Dr. Martin Mungwa, FASCE, in a special 5-minute address saying Ambazonia rising from faction chaos to diplomatic clarity under the leadership of Dr. Samuel Sako. Take a listen.
This is the voice of Ambazonia, broadcasting truth from our government in exile to our resilient people and to the entire world. Our commentary is titled Ambazonia Rising, from Factional Chaos to Diplomatic Clarity under the leadership of Dr. Samuel Sako. Dear Ambazonians, as the Yaoundé regime prepares for presidential elections scheduled for October 12, 2025, another reality is taking shape behind the veil of propaganda. The strategic ascent of Ambazonia, not as a marginalized insurgency, but as a structured, credible government in exile, increasingly recognized on the international stage. For the past 5 years, under the leadership of President Dr. Samuel Sako, the government of the Federal Republic of Southern Cameroon's Ambazonia has accomplished what many thought impossible, transforming a fragmented struggle into a coherent project of national restoration. From the outset of this mandate, President Sako built a functional government in exile. He convened a restored assembly, unified the treasury, reorganized diplomacy, and established a national defense structure. The structure is known as the Ambazonian State Army, the official self-defense force of the Ambazonian people, led by General Hadno. It now operates in coordinations with local civilian authorities and under strategic oversight of the government in exile. This force is not a militia. It is a disciplined defense institution rooted in the principles of protecting the homeland and upholding humanitarian conduct. Codes of engagement have been introduced, and undisciplined groups have been disarmed or disbanded. But above all, President Sako anchored our struggle within the framework of international law. He aligned our cause with the criteria defined by the Montevideo Convention of 1933, which holds that a state must possess a permanent population, a defined territory, a functioning government, and the capacity to enter into relations with other states. Ambazonia meets all four criteria. Our people exist, our historical boundaries are documented, our government operates, and our diplomatic representations are active. On the diplomatic front, the progress has been significant. Through submissions to the United Nations, the US Congress, the African Union, and ECOWAS, Ambazonia is now regarded as a state actor awaiting formal recognition. Our cooperation with figures such as Ambassador Thibault Naj has borne fruit. Mr. Naj, former US Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs, described Cameroon as a volcano of injustice. Today, he is joined by numerous scholars, legal experts, and international policymakers. In terms of communication, ABC Networks 24 has replaced cacophony of conflicting voices with an official, professional, and committed channel. This network broadcasts verified reports, legal dossiers, and coherent governance messages. Yaounde's strategy to exploit our internal divisions has failed. The Ayaba faction is weakened. The diaspora is mobilized, and the leadership of President Dr. Samuel Sako inspires both respect and stability. The BI regime now faces three major threats: the loss of international diplomatic protection, the emergence of a structured, respected, and rooted Ambazonian government, and the collapse of France's diplomatic credibility, increasingly viewed as complicit in a silent genocide. Fellow Ambazonians, the road to recognition remains difficult, but the path is now clearly laid out. Sovereignty is not merely declared, it is built, it is defended, it is legitimized through law and order. In 2025, the world no longer asks whether Ambazonia exists, it asks how much longer it can continue to ignore our inalienable right to self-determination. This is the voice of Ambazonia. Stand tall, stay proud, and justice is near.
Justice indeed is near. Well, coming up next is news around Africa. Well, as global hunger shows signs of improvement, a new United Nations report paints a worrying picture for Africa, where food insecurity continues to worsen. According to the report, an estimated 512 million people across the world are expected to remain undernourished by the end of this decade, and 60% of them in Africa. The stark figures were revealed during the African Union's Global Food System Summit held in Ethiopia, where the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres issued a grave warning via video message, and Guterres urged world leaders to prioritize food access and security, declaring that food should never be used as a weapon of war. His comments come amid rising concerns over the use of food blockades and manipulation in conflict zones. The report estimates that over 280 million Africans are currently malnourished, a number that has grown steadily due to a combination of climate shocks, prolonged conflict, and economic instability. Mahmoud Ali Yusuf, a chairperson of the African Union Commission, emphasized these factors as primary drivers of the growing crisis. He called on both African government and the international community to bolster resilience through investment in agriculture, infrastructure, and climate adaptation. In South Sudan's capital, Juba, the reality of this crisis is evident on the streets. Small businesses like roadside donut stands have become survival strategies for families struggling to make ends meet. People are doing what they can do, to feed their families. But the situation is getting worse, said a resident. The United Nations report concludes with a call for urgent, coordinated action to reverse the trajectory of hunger on the continent. Without immediate intervention, experts warn that Africa risks facing a food catastrophe that could erase decades of development progress. In Ivory Coast, we see with just 3 months remaining before Ivory Coast's highly anticipated presidential election, the country's longtime leader, President Alassane Ouattara, has officially declared his candidacy for a 4th term in office. The announcement made during a nationally televised address on Tuesday evening puts an end to months of speculation surrounding his political future. The 83-year-old leader's decision is likely to stir political debate, given his age and the controversy surrounding term limits in the West African nation. While Ouattara and his supporters argue that constitutional reforms adopted in 2016 reset the presidential term count, critics maintain that a 4th term undermines democratic principles and risks deepening political tensions. Ouattara has been at the helm of Ivorian politics since 2011, following a post-election crisis that claimed over 3,000 lives and brought the country to the brink of civil war. Since then, he has presided over a period of economic growth, infrastructural development, and relative political stability, though not without criticism regarding democratic backsliding and crackdowns on dissent. His previous announcement in 2020 that he would not seek a 3rd term was reversed following the sudden death of his chosen successor, then Prime Minister Amadou Gon Coulibaly. That controversial 3rd term run led to violent protests and opposition boycott, with dozens killed in the unrest. Now, with the 2025 presidential election drawing near, Ouattara's candidacy is likely to be a defining issue. His opponents, including figures from both the ruling party and opposition groups, are expected to challenge his eligibility and rally public opinion against his extended rule. The upcoming election will serve as a critical test for Ivory Coast democratic institutions and its capacity to hold peaceful, transparent, and credible elections. Many Ivorians remain hopeful that their country can avoid the turmoil of past electoral cycles. Ouattara concluded his speech by calling on all candidates and political actors to commit to a peaceful electoral process. He said, "Let us work together to strengthen our democracy and ensure that the will of the people is respected." Coming up next will be news across the globe. On the global scene, the United Kingdom has indicated it may recognize Palestine as a state by September unless Israel takes tangible steps to address the worsening humanitarian crisis in Gaza. The development marks a significant policy shift as international pressure mounts over the war's devastating toll. The Gaza Health Ministry reported that more than 60,000 Palestinians have been killed since Israel launched its military campaign in October 2023. Amid the ongoing conflict, the World Food Programme warned that a full-scale famine is unfolding in the enclave, describing the situation as dire. In a statement issued Tuesday, the British government outlined 3 key demands: an immediate ceasefire, uninterrupted humanitarian access, and the release of hostages still held in Gaza. At least 50 hostages are believed to remain in the territory, with nearly 30 presumed dead. The United Kingdom's position includes a timeline stating that recognition of Palestinian statehood could take place during the United Nations General Assembly in September if Israel fails to improve the situation. Well, this approach aligns with a growing trend among Western nations following France's recent announcement to recognize Palestine. The humanitarian condition in Gaza has deteriorated sharply since the breakdown of a ceasefire agreement in May. Aid deliveries have been severely limited, with Israel allowing only minimal access. But then, in an attempt to restructure aid redistribution, We see Israeli authorities backed by the United States replacing the United Nations system with the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, the GHF, a network that operates just 4 distribution sites compared to hundreds previously managed by the United Nations. Children and families have been among the hardest hit, with hundreds killed while trying to access aid. International observers have expressed outrage at the scale of suffering and the slow pace of relief efforts. Britain's decision, if implemented, would bring it in line with over 140 countries that already recognize Palestine. However, such a move is expected to draw strong opposition from Israel and the United States. Washington already has criticized France's recognition as reckless and potentially supportive of extremist groups. Domestically, Prime Minister Keir Starmer is facing pressure from members of his Labour Party who are calling for a more assertive stance on Palestinian statehood. Although previous United Kingdom governments have endorsed recognition when the time was right, no formal conditions or timelines were ever established until now. Tuesday's announcement followed an emergency cabinet session during Parliament's summer recess. British officials met with European partners to finalize a new peace plan focused on expanding aid access and reducing hostilities in Gaza. Meanwhile, public support for Israel's military action is waning. A recent Gallup poll revealed that only 1/3 of Americans now approve of the operation, down from nearly half at the start of the conflict. Away from Israel and Gaza, we see the deadly flood in Beijing and Hebei killing 38 as China faces extreme weather crisis. Intense rainstorms have left at least 38 people dead across northern China, with Beijing and its neighboring province of Hebei among the worst hit regions. The capital alone recorded 30 fatalities, while 8 deaths were reported in Hebei, according to state media. The storms, which began late last week, triggered widespread flooding, landslides, power outages, and the evacuation of tens of thousands of residents. In some areas, nearly a year's worth of rainfall was recorded in just a few days. Beijing's mountainous districts of Miyun and Yanqing bore the brunt of the devastation. Officials confirmed that 28 people died in accord in Miyun and 2 in Yanqing, calling the rainfall events rare and highly destructive. By midnight Monday, parts of Miyun had received as much as 21 inches of rain, nearly matching the city's average annual rainfall. The severity of the downpours prompted Beijing to issue its highest level rainstorm alert for the first time this year. More than 80,000 residents were evacuated, over 30 road sections damaged, and power was cut off in at least 130 villages, according to reports. Well, China's central government has allocated 350 million won, that's approximately 48 million US dollars, in disaster relief fund for the affected areas, including Beijing and Hebei. National authorities said the country had entered a critical stage of its summer flood season and urged local officials to prioritize saving lives. Many residents in the flooded areas reported severe property damage in Miyun district. Homes were inundated, vehicles swept away, and families forced to take shelter on rooftops. Others recounted being stranded and wading through floodwaters to reach higher ground. By Tuesday morning, the alert level in Beijing had been lowered, allowing parks and tourist sites to reopen, though debris and water damage remains visible in many neighborhoods. Meanwhile, the threat of further extreme weather continues. Heavy rainfall is expected to shift eastward as Typhoon Koumei approaches China's coastal provinces. The typhoon is forecast to make landfall by Wednesday, raising additional concerns over flooding in eastern China. Summer flooding is not uncommon in Beijing. In 2023, another severe flood event claimed at least 33 lives, underscoring the region's vulnerability to climate-related weather extremes. And with that, we've come to the end of tonight's Undaunted. But before we go, let's take a look at the recap. On Undaunted tonight, we brought to you the Ambazonian State Army of BOYO County neutralizing occupation convoy in tactical ambush. The Colonial SDO retaliates with road blockade as lockdown solidarity continues. Ambazonia rejects the collective punishment. And on the electoral front, Akere doubles down on betrayal, endorsing Colonial hashtag federalism as Ambazonians demand total freedom. CNA's Big Six spotlights sparking political theater, Ambazonians rejecting colonial elections and demand their own sovereignty. On the final note on the home front, we saw Ambazonian rising from factional chaos to diplomatic clarity under the leadership of Dr. Sako, an editorial by the Secretary of State for Communications and IT, Dr. Martin Mugwa. And in Africa, Ivory Coast President Alassane Ouattara announces bid for fourth term ahead of presidential election. On the global scene, the United Kingdom signals possible recognition of Palestinians as Gaza death toll surpasses 60,000. And that was it for tonight's Undaunted, bringing into the news untold stories. On behalf of the entire Undaunted, we say thank you for tuning in. We'll leave you with ABC Amba TV images. Good night and God bless you.